Interviewing involves conversations. And you're thinking, duh, Scott. I know it involves conversations. You know it, I know it. So that's a good thing, right? No, not always. I am on the painful end at times of watching interviewing conversations that just go sideways because neither party, the corporate side nor the candidate side, really knows how to have a meaningful, effective conversation. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of an experiential interview, because I think talk is cheap. Anybody can talk themselves into a job if they're smart enough and they say the right things. And if a hiring manager or HR talent acquisition isn't careful, you can let somebody talk themselves into a job. So all this talk can be a problem or it can be an asset. And it's one of the reasons today I wanted to shoot this video. I was so fortunate to come across a conversation expert. He's very modest. He doesn't call himself a conversation expert, but I do, because Stuart understands conversation. He's studied it, and he helps organizations with conversation. So Stuart Chittenden, who's with me here today, he's the founder, I love this name, of Squish Talks. And this is a consultancy that designs and delivers training programs, also some community experiences, and my favorite, dialogue-based interventions. I got to say that again, dialogue-based interventions. What a great problem-solving methodology. And all of these are grounded in the principles and practices of conversation. So today, Stuart and I are going to have a conversation about conversations, but specifically how we can turn the interview conversations into something more meaningful and impactful. So the end result for the client and the candidate, the company, and the person who wants a job fits better every single time. So Stuart, thank you so much for joining me. We've been trying to set this up for a while. I really appreciate you taking the time today to have this conversation with me.
It's my pleasure, Scott. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for asking me to chat with you.
So I only have one question, but it's one big question. And that question is how? How can we help people listening and watching this create more meaningful conversations? So the people we're talking about are the corporate side. That's either HR, talent acquisition, hiring managers, or a combination of those individuals. And then the other side, the candidate side. How do we help both those parties over a period of months before a job opportunity arises, have good conversations? Now, before you answer that, I've got to give a side note. For those who've not watched any videos before, you may have noticed I said before the job opportunity arises. I believe in the new way of hiring. The old way of hiring is you keep a job open until the right person shows up. It's one of the big contributing factors to a long time to fill. The new way of hiring is you line up people and then wait for the right jobs to open. And when you do that, you can fill your jobs in an instant. So to do that, there has to be some dialogue. There has to be a conversation. That's the reason for this question. So Stuart, let's dig into that. Meaningful conversations. How do these organizations that are watching this video create these conversations? And maybe we should talk about the why first. So before we go to the how, why is it so incredibly important that people take the time to plan and then execute really meaningful conversations before the jobs arise?
Well, thanks for asking the question, Scott. The first response I would have to the why conversation, and why specifically conversation, to help answer the question that you're raising regarding preloading candidates over this period of time so the job is filled as soon as it opens. The why is because fundamentally we're endeavoring to create relationships. We're endeavoring to create some kind of connection that enables both the organization, the company, its culture to unfold to the candidate pool, so the candidates understand fully what it is, what the brand is that they're going to commit to. They're going to commit themselves, and one would hope, in a 100% engaged way. So there's that idea of unfolding, but that works in reverse too, right? So the candidates also need to have that space to be able to unfold and to reveal their aptitudes and their attitudes to the recruiting team as well. And you mentioned earlier the interview process, perhaps the traditional approach to that being somewhat artificial. And it's really hard to build up an understanding of the mindset and the psychological profile of this candidate unless it's allowed to unfold somewhat naturally. And we don't allow enough time either. So trust is one of those slippery, abstract concepts. And we want to create a methodology of trust that is quick and fast, and we can get to it straight away. But we need to not shortchange it. We need to give it time. And all of these things, I think, are part of the why.
So there's so many good things I could point out in what you said, and I'm going to limit it to 3. And the first thing is, I love how you model an effective conversation. When I got done with my question, you did one of the simplest but most powerful things that I watch most people not do in interviews, and that was repeat for understanding. You took the time to reiterate my question back to me, not parroting it back to me, but in your own understanding to create context, and did it beautifully. And you know, the thing I loved was it wasn't this obligatory exercise. You took your time. You probably took 20, 25 seconds to do that. And you did it thoughtfully and beautifully done. I could end the video here, and I think if people start to emulate that alone, they'll be better conversationalists. But you said 2 other things. You talked about the why on the company side, as I heard it, and the what on the candidate side. So the why the company's looking, why this job is open, why this interview is happening, why there's this conversation. That's the context the company is creating for this interview dialogue. And then the candidate can talk about the what. If the candidate understands the why, the motivation behind the hiring, all that underlies it, then, as you said, they can talk about what they bring, their abilities, their skills, their experiences. So am I right on that if we try to boil it down to its essence, it's a why and a what in some of the initial stages of the conversation that kind of starts this dialogue dance when it's being done right?
Completely. I think that's a very fair assessment.
Okay, good. So let's talk now about the how, because we've kind of set this up of, okay, and I think most people knew this was important. And we've probably, for some people, just reiterated the importance, but for others, they probably haven't thought about it in that kind of context before. So let's now set up the how. How do people go about having these meaningful conversations? And I'll even challenge you, what, from your experiences, as you talk about the how, what are some of the things that you see people have been missing, that if they just do those things, the conversation would be immediately more meaningful?
Well, I will go back to what you said at the beginning, which is that you were entitled to call me a conversation expert, but I resist that a little bit. And I'm hesitant always to tell people how they should manifest their art of conversation, because I think we all approach it slightly differently. But I'm just going to pick on a few key principles that for me make up the art of conversation, and how we can all perhaps be considerate of using these principles to create the environment for authentic dialogue. So those principles include elements such as curiosity. They include chance, empathy, silence, and courage too. Courage is perhaps the bad news, because at that point it bifurcates, and we need to think about not being able to disagree with everybody, but how to do that, how to accept that without being disagreeable. And also borrow from Brene Brown and her work on shame and vulnerability. Someone has to take that first step, engaging with another human being. The price of that is you have to expose a little bit of your inner landscape. And that can be frightening. But those key principles, I think, are the platform on which talent managers, HR staff can begin to build the circumstances that they bring authentic conversation and dialogue to their candidate pool. And these are the principles they should be looking to encourage from those candidates.
So I happen to notice, if I was listening correctly, those words you said all started with C. Would you repeat those again? Because I suspect people were scribbling a bit. I was scribbling in my head. And just, if you would, mention them one at a time and just take a moment. Why are each, and tell us, after each one, why is each one so important when it comes to creating meaningful conversation?
Sure. So let's start with curiosity. So curiosity, I think, is essential, because if you just do this thought experiment right now, if you just imagine that everything you know is all you will ever know from this point forward,
Mm.
things become rather pointless, it seems.
Yeah, I'm already bored with the rest of my life. So
So, we have to be adventurous, right? We have to
yeah.
adventure to the edge of our knowledge and be curious about learning, because if we're not, then we really are in sort of to borrow from Carol Dweck, we're in a fixed mindset state, and we
Mm.
can't grow as people. So that's one element of curiosity. It's how we step outside of ourselves to other people. Chance is another of the principles. And
Yeah, this one really intrigued me, so I can't wait to hear this one.
so we naturally incline as a species towards certainty. We want to chunk information in ways that can help us navigate what is a complex world. Now, of course, we have moved a long way at this point from where we were 10, 20, 30,000 years ago. So we have evolved in a different way, but nonetheless, we still carry with us this need to create safety in our world. But
Mm.
the problem with that, if we look at how ideas and creativity arise, it's from the unexpected.
Mm.
The genius of creative breakthroughs and ideas that are fresh and novel is from the unexpected. And so you have this tension between certainty, which makes us more comfortable with our day, but also that meaning that today will be like tomorrow, will be like the next day, unless we just allow a degree of fate, serendipity, the unexpected, or chance into our lives.
Mm.
And conversation, over time, many examples of conversational moments where one inventor has had a conversation with someone else, and that's the spark. And you could borrow from, I think, Stephen Johnson has a book called Where Good Ideas Come From, and he talks about a collision of hunches. So a hunch here with a hunch here, and it's in that dialogue that you create something, the sparks of something new. So that's chance.
Okay.
Courage is the other C that I was using, and of course I bifurcated that, but I don't think it takes a lot of explanation to understand that if you're going to form a real human connection with someone, you have to lean into it. And I don't know how many of us can remember being teenagers and finding some romantic interest in someone else. And maybe I'll borrow from a Marvin Gaye song.
Okay.
I forget the lyric now, but he says something along the lines of, you don't get anywhere by standing against the wall. You've got to get your back off the wall and dance, right?
Yes.
So you have to throw yourself into life, but it's nerve-wracking to throw
Yes.
yourself into life. It's nerve-wracking to be that person that steps forward and takes a chance to find a connection with someone else. I think it's partly, I am not here to bash technology at all. We're recording via technology and having a good conversation based on that. But if we find it easier, let me ask you this, if you find it easier and more comfortable to pull out a smartphone and contact, let's just say 500 friends on Facebook instantly, you can do that instantly. If that's more comfortable to you than sitting and talking with a stranger next to you, just one person, we know that perhaps our calibration of courage is a little off here.
Yes. Yes.
The other principles didn't begin with a C, empathy and silence. So I don't know if I should talk about those.
Well, briefly, so empathy and silence, my question for you about them was, why is each of those important for a conversation to be meaningful?
Okay. The fundamental benefit of conversation is it enables us to connect with another human being.
Agreed. Agreed.
And so empathy is an integral part of that. We have to step outside of ourselves, and we can do that through conversation to see the world through the eyes of another person, to see the world through the eyes of millions of other people. And the benefit of that too is that not only do you see the world differently from other perspectives, you get to see yourself from other people's perspectives. And that has really profound implications to how we calibrate our own behavior, and also ethical considerations too, about how we see our behavior and actions in the context of how other people see us. And in silence, it's the way that we're detectives. We investigate our own thinking, and we allow space for someone else to occupy that. So it seems counterintuitive to talk about silence as we talk about conversation, but inherently there needs to be not only the give and take, but also the chance for the conversation to tell us what it wants us to think about and how we can process that.
You said the most important word, process. Silence lets me do that. And without the silence, I can't. In fact, if I don't have that silence, I can't process, I'm probably not going to ask the next really good question that needs to be asked. You know, I noticed you said several times the word calibration. And you've given us a way to calibrate here, Stuart. You know, we can ask ourselves the question, are we engaging in curiosity? Are we employing chance? Are we having courage in our conversations? Courage to have maybe the hard conversation? Are we employing our empathy? Most of us have it, I think, but that doesn't mean we use it. And lastly, are we engaging in moments of silence? And I'm not talking about these Star-Spangled Banner moments of silence, but the conversational ones. What a beautiful test. And I would suggest to everybody watching and listening to this today, observe your next interview conversation, or any conversations for that matter, and watch for how these elements show up or not. In fact, the one that intrigued me the most, Stuart, was chance. I thought it was going to be curiosity, because I think curiosity, that wanting to understand where it's almost painful. That's, I want to know. That's why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I wanted to know what you know about conversations that's going to help this audience. But actually, I'm walking away with the one about chance. And what I was instructed by what you said today is, if I heavily script out a conversation with a candidate, and I'm always on script, I'm taking no chance whatsoever. I'm not allowing that creative spark that you talked about to pop up. We didn't script this heavily today. We had some ideas what we were going to talk about, but I had no idea that idea of chance was going to spark me in this way. But I think that's where the magic comes in, because if we think about it, what are the things we remember from a conversation? What we remember typically, I think, is the unexpected. The comment or the idea that came up, or the connection that we had with one another that was completely unexpected. To me, that's chance. So you've really given us a formula, I think, for calibrating our conversations in a much, much better way. So Stuart, we're almost out of time. So if you would do this, well, first, thank you. Thanks for joining me today. I want people to know how to learn more about you. I know you have good content. I know you're talking about conversations on a regular basis. So what's the best way for people to reach out and follow and learn more about you?
Thank you for the invitation, Scott. It's been a pleasure chatting with you too. Notwithstanding that perhaps I maybe was emphasizing that people should be pro-conversation as opposed to pro-technology, nonetheless, the best way to find me is in the virtual realm, which is at the website squishtalks.com.
I'm going to just assume that you're using technology in the right ways versus the inappropriate ways. So
I'm as guilty of both as everybody.
Conversation or technology can enhance conversation, or it can take the place of it, and nothing really can. And I think that's one of the other things I'm reminded of today, is that doing this and pretending I have a smartphone, it's not a conversation. It is maybe a confirmation. Yes, I'll be there at 5 o'clock, but it's not a conversation. This is when we're dialoguing like this. So Stuart, thank you so much. I hope all of you watching today will check out his website and his work, and let a little of that conversational authority, and yes, we'll say it, expertise, rub off on you, because often all we have are our words, and we better choose them carefully, especially when it comes down to having conversations that determine the course of who we employ and the course of somebody else's career. I think that's pretty darn important. So Stuart, thank you again, and thanks for all of you who are watching. Have a good rest of your day now.